My name's Rosemary Tilley. I'm the founder and director of Construction Advisor. Construction Advisor provides a daily news feed for the whole of the construction industry, in addition to a monthly report designed to inform the industry about what's been happening, both from a data perspective, a trend perspective, and hopefully provide some forecasts as to what might unfold over the next period of time.
Rosemary, you've got extensive experience within the building and construction industry, working with senior executives and business leaders. But before we explore that, can you tell me a little about your personal views regarding mental health and wellbeing within the construction industry?
In addition to the work that I do from a business perspective, I'm also a qualified therapist, and in the 20 years or so that I've been working as a coach, pretty much at the senior level primarily, what I've learned is that the struggles that people in the industry have are not really to do with just time and budget and quality and safety. There's a whole lot of additional things that they're now wrestling with. It's making the job even more challenging.
It's interesting you're saying that. What are some of those challenges that you're experiencing in coaching business leaders of today? And how do you see that emerging over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
I think essentially the whole area of mental health has developed a prominence that was not the case years ago. And there's a recognition that something's shifting, something's happening. And there seem to be two ways to approach the issue. One is that it's this big black box and people don't understand it, they don't know what to do, and therefore they're stuck. They're in a form of stalemate. The other way of approaching it is that a very simplistic way of dealing with mental health. And that is really, let's do a few things like give them a fruit bowl, give them access to a gym and maybe access to an EAP service, and that's kind of all we need to do.
It's interesting you say that, because that's to me like a bit of a tick and flick. It's not getting to the root cause of the problem, and that's about making sure, similar to what we do and how we've tackled the physical health and well-being within the workforce, but how do we tackle those mental health and wellbeing initiatives? We're used to working with cultural heritage management plans and safety plans, capability statements and the like. Do you see that needs to now transition into positive mental health and wellbeing action plans?
100%, John. I feel really strongly that the journey that we've been able to go on for safety, where years ago there was no such thing as safety education and training. We didn't record statistics. We didn't educate senior management. In some tier 1 construction companies, the safety agenda or the safety item is the first item on the management agenda, which is where it should be. There were many, many things we didn't do then. We didn't include a safety management plan in tenders, but that has now changed. It's absolutely mandatory, and it's enforced now by legislation. And in a sense, if we could achieve that with safety, why could we not do the same thing with mental health? There's no construction site that I go onto where people are not wearing PPE, and where if it's a well-run site where the management are not also enforcing those standards. But that's taken a while. It's taken an understanding on the part of leadership and I guess some nudging to help people become more compliant.
In your work with senior executives and business leaders over the many years, and you've talked about the challenges that are confronting them, what do you think is probably keeping them up at night?
I'm not sure what keeps them up at night is the real cause of the problem. My sense of where the problem lies is very much that we do not understand the full spectrum of elements that affect mental health. Philosophically, we run a program within Construction Advisor called Optimise Q, and the idea behind Optimise Q is that in the same way that we now understand IQ and EQ, what we're saying is we've got to increase people's intelligence about how to optimise their lives. And if we apply that to leaders who may be worried without quite fully understanding what they're worried about, in many cases it's because we think too narrowly about mental health. mental health really has at least 5 elements that affect it. It's looking after your body, it's looking after your mind, it's looking after your relationships, it's looking after the practicalities of your life, and it's looking after your purpose, your values. You know, what do you want people to say at your funeral? You know, have you led a life that's consistent with the values that you espouse? So it's in combination with those, I guess, 5 separate things, but which are interlinked, that to me the key to making some improvements lie.
Okay. Probably touches on where you see some of the needs and opportunities to develop and deliver preventative mental health plans. So we're all very good at looking at cure, but what about the prevention side?
Well, one of the analogies that we use fairly regularly is that what we've been doing is providing an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. What we need to start to do is to put a fence at the top. And some of the ways that you would start to do that is to start to educate the whole of the workforce in what are those factors that influence mental health. And understanding it is one thing, but then it's about how do we apply that knowledge into the workforce. One of the metaphors that we use is if a workplace were like a fish tank, and you've got 2 sorts of fish tanks, a dirty one and a clean one. In the dirty one, the fish struggle to move around. They're not very good performers. They want to jump out or they die. And it indicates that no one's really cared enough about the tank or the fish within the tank. On the other hand, you can have a beautiful fish tank where the fish look as if they love being there, they move around easily, they certainly don't want to jump out, and the results everyone else wants to participate in because it looks like a nice environment. And managers would really think of themselves as aquarium managers, but in a way, it's kind of what it might be.
What do you see some of the approaches and frameworks that are needed to support leaders in creating the cultural change that's necessary to assist benefit workers and workplaces and leaders, for that matter, to proactively invest in a culture of wellbeing for their staff?
I think whatever is proposed has to appear to be doable, needs to be simple enough that the average leader in a business or owner of a business can say, okay, that sounds like a good idea, we could do that. And to me, the starting point has to be where you go into an organisation and you do what we call an audit, where using 11 specific parameters, we would talk to the staff. And when I say talk to the staff, I mean everybody, not just the leaders of the organisation, because they often have a distorted view of how good things are. That you interview people in, could be focus groups, and where we make sure it's a cross-section, use that information to then give them, if you like, an analysis, a report on where the strengths are, because you might have lots of really good things happening, but also where perhaps the deficits are. But then when you point out a deficit, it's really then about saying, okay, well, what are some quick wins we can create? What are some things we can start to tackle? And that if we use our approach, we give you a score. And then the idea is the next time you do it, which might be 12 months down the track or earlier if you choose to, that the idea is to get that score up so that not only to the leaders of the group, but to the whole of the workforce, they're demonstrating that they're actually doing something practical to make a difference.
So you touched on the frontline teams and getting them engaged in the process, and a lot of leaders actively promote upward feedback and upward support from their frontline teams. Can you tell us a little bit about the successes? What makes an organisation that you've been working with stand out and perform in this area of mental health and wellbeing, and what has been some of the results of your work with some of these business leaders?
There are probably many answers depending on which organisation you're talking about, and there would be different factors at play in those different circumstances. But the thing that springs to mind first of all, in organisations where the owner or the key managers or manager have experienced either directly or indirectly some experience with mental health that's helped them to understand what this amounts to, what it can mean, what impact it can have on people, and that they're then motivated to say, I want to do something about making sure within this workplace that we're addressing it.
If there was a key message that you wanted to get across to business leaders and executives today about creating a mentally healthy workplace and work environment, what would be that single key message? What is their takeout from today?
I think it would have to be that we can't delay making positive, constructive steps towards improving the status quo. In the same way that if you've got a mental health issue and you do nothing about it, it will get worse. So early intervention is proven to make a difference. It doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome, but it will make a difference. And the same thing has to happen within a business. If we've got an issue, if we delay, then potentially all we're doing is creating a whole lot of secondary and tertiary problems, which are then more difficult to deal with.
It's great insights, Rosemary. I just want to explore that a little bit further, particularly with regards to creating pathways for youth into our industry. And is that a challenge, particularly around that sense of purpose, particularly having a value within the community? Do you think there's a disconnection when you have youth unemployment, high levels of youth unemployment, and we see that in a number of areas, particularly in the outer Melbourne and some of the regional areas, that disconnection around youth unemployment is quite real?
I feel extremely strongly that understanding life, learning some skills about how you navigate life, particularly in the 21st century, is critical for everybody, but it's incredibly important for young people, because the earlier in life you learn these kinds of skills, the better the rest of your life is going to be. So if there's something we can do for whether it's kids still at school or people who've recently left school or graduates, then it's all a fantastic investment in the future for society as a whole.
Yeah, it provides youth with a sense of purpose and a sustainable job, which at the end of the day leads to a more healthier, broader community. Rosemary, I want to thank you for your own personal insight, but more importantly, the support you and Construction Advisor have provided the CCF as a supporting sponsor of our Positive Plans, Positive Futures program. I look forward to the journey ahead. We've got a lot of work to do together, but I look forward to that and your continued support. Thank you.
And we applaud what you're doing, because it's only with initiatives such as this one that we can make the difference that the industry definitely needs.